This is a response to PPSimmons' video, Silly Evolutionists Chasing Butterflies and Stumble into Intelligent Design Again. In it, you use a report of research into the fabrication of structures that mimic the iridescence of butterfly wing scales as a pretext to smear evolutionary theory with your cranial excrement. And if that's a little stronger than I normally like to begin, it's because your entire video appears to consist solely of non-stop arguments from both ignorance and personal incredulity, sprinkled with generous amounts of gross stupidity, or more likely in my opinion just downright dishonesty and plain old lies. But then again, you are a creationist, so I shouldn't be surprised. There's also a more specific reason, but I'll get onto that later.
To some eyes they appear bright blue, but to others they appear green. The article says, this could explain why the butterfly has evolved this way of producing color. Gee, isn't evolution a smart and wonderful thing? Of course, Dr. Cole did not explain how the butterfly could have evolved such a clever system. But they don't have to explain it. Don't you know evolution, well, it just is. It's a proven fact.
Has anyone told you that sarcasm is the lowest form of wit? You might want to remember that the next time you try being funny. Anyway, I'm curious as to why you feel that an article on nanoengineering should contain an explanation of evolutionary theory. Of course, you might say, Dr. Cole is the one who brought up evolution, so he should explain it. If so, my response would be that I think it's fair to assume that Dr. Cole was working on the assumption that he was addressing people who are actually interested in science and not dishonest creationists who are only interested in using his words to metaphorically urinate on it in order to defend their intellectually indefensible belief system. And you end up illustrating this dishonesty perfectly by implying that this lack of explanation is a deliberate and underhanded tactic to pass off what you claim to be a baseless assertion. Rationalists do not owe retards a full explanation of evolutionary theory every time the word is mentioned, in the same way that they do not have to explain non-Euclidean geometry every time they say, "Gravity!" If you're that interested in evolution, read a fucking book about it.
But perhaps this butterfly system was designed. The evidence for that is just as credible, perhaps even more so.
And perhaps this butterfly system was ejected from the bottom of a rhinoceros at close to escape velocity. Perhaps, but equally unlikely. I don't suppose you'd like to back up that baseless assertion, would you? Could you enlighten us with regard to the nature of this evidence? Because if you're not referring to irreducible complexity whose lame examples have all been refuted, so-called fine-tuning, or any other tired old argument from ignorance or disbelief, then I'd be interested to know. However, I strongly suspect that you're referring to the same old shit we've all heard before and whose credibility is only apparent to your kind, who would deny anything that conflicts with your mass delusion and accept anything that you can use to affirm it, no matter how ridiculous.
But whether design or evolution, one thing is clear. Dr. Cole admitted, the shiny green patches on this tropical butterfly's wing scales are a stunning example of nature's ingenuity in optical design. End quote. Yes, Dr. Cole, it was designed. The evidence is plain. Thank you for using that word.
Once again, your blatant dishonesty shines through. Not only do you make it sound like Dr. Cole is deliberately hiding something, you then also jump onto the word design like a preacher onto a rent boy, even though you clearly know that you're taking the word entirely out of context. I have to congratulate you on one thing though. You're the first fundy I've come across who is actually able to quote mine an article without removing any of the words. Have you ever considered a career change? I'm sure someone could make use of your talent for weasel words. By the way, don't think I didn't notice the way you artfully switched from suggesting that scales could either have evolved or been designed earlier, to now simply baselessly asserting the latter. And there you go with evidence again. Any chance of presenting some? Congratulations, PPSimmons. You appear to be devolving from a mammal to an amphibian. The evidence is plain.
The pseudoscience of evolution contributes nothing to a particular story except for a tacked-on, after-the-fact fairy tale about the butterfly mysteriously evolving some amazing capability for the purpose of doing something. with no explanation of how it did such a thing, why it did it, when it did it, or what it may be continually doing now.
I want to preface this with an assumption that I'm making. The facts that your channels say that you're a computer programmer and your ability to produce such prodigious numbers of videos despite their dubious content suggest that you aren't without some kind of intellectual ability. Coupling this to the fact that you must spend quite some time seeking out new articles and reading about evolution in order to trash it, we can, I think, conclude that you must be aware that you could fill an entire library with what's being written about the mechanisms and theory of evolution, and yet here you act as if evolution has no explanatory power at all. Even if you disagree with it, why don't you have the common decency to at least accurately represent what you're arguing against? Dishonesty is not an attractive characteristic. In addition, even if the exact mechanism of scale evolution has not been described, your argument from ignorance proves nothing other than your intellectual inability to make a convincing case. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and inductive reasoning from the evidence in our library can lead us to reasonably conclude that butterfly wing scales evolved. And by the way, why would your perfect designer have used at least 3 different designs for producing iridescence? Can't he make up his mind? Doesn't make much sense, does it? But it does if these characteristics evolve. And finally, I find your reference to fairy stories quite amusing, particularly since you're the one who believes in magic.
Even though human inventors, using intelligent design and modern technology, cannot even come close to replicating it.
How can I take this seriously? Even though the article clearly states that they have replicated it, what relevance does this have? Humans have been working scientifically for nearly 400 years. If we'd had 4 billion, I've no doubt that we'd do an even better job than nature, and certainly than your invisible friend.
Yet we are to believe that a primordial soup, millions of years, some strikes of lightning, and random chance evolved this amazing intricacy of this particular butterfly? Astounding. Silly scientist, once again, you have unwittingly pointed the world to the wonders of intelligent design.
Aha! The argument from personal incredulity! I knew it was coming. Life's complex, but guess what? It's evolved for 4 billion years from the molecular level up. It's bound to be complex. Just because you can't, or more accurately, won't understand evolutionary theory doesn't mean that it's not true, in the same way that you're not fully understanding quantum electrodynamics and solid-state physics doesn't mean that you can't program a computer or make crappy videos. The inability of your shriveled and crippled mind to understand something is not grounds for asserting that it's not true. And what is this creationist obsession with lightning and with random chance? If you want to argue against evolution, then read about it first and do it fairly, instead of picking out random words and using them to tell your vile lies.
And the idea that this butterfly somehow evolved this amazing ability by accident, even though human inventors, pooling all of their intelligence, cannot begin to replicate it in its perfection, is a huge leap of faith.
As for leaps of faith, if you applied your critical criteria to your own beliefs, you'd be dropping your baby Jesus into the font and running out of the church screaming in a heartbeat.
Yet, this is what evolutionists want us to believe every day, simply because they declare it to be so. The unintelligent, directionless, uncaring, blind forces of evolved nature somehow used physics and then designed this state-of-the-art, self-replicating technology in this butterfly? Congratulations on your faith, Dr. Cole. Silly scientists.
I personally don't want you to believe in anything. I just want you to stop lying about evolution in the breathtaking way you just did. Even a 9th grader could give a better account. Aren't you capable of forming the words natural selection? Congratulations, you just devolved into pond scum. And finally we get to the part that really pissed me off, even though it's the 2nd time you said silly scientists. I take personal offense to this because I happen to be a scientist myself, so I make no apologies to my insulting tone in this video. Because when silly scientists all over the world are hard at work trying to understand nature and make life better for everyone, while selfish, childish, lying, ignorant and arrogant little pricks like you have nothing better to do than insult them while at the same time luxuriating in the blessings that these rationalists have bestowed upon them, I get pissed. So why don't you just shut the hell up and crawl back into the fucking hole you came out of?